Sharon. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar where we commemorate 50 years since the passing of the landmark legislation of the Rehabilitation Act. Today, we have a stellar lineup of presenters that I will introduce momentarily, and we are going to focus on the power of independent living and employment. A quick description of myself is that I am a Hispanic woman in my very early 40s. I have dark brown hair. I have my hair pulled back today with some dark purple glasses. I too am joining you from my home office where you see a bookshelf and a picture of a lotus flower in the background. Next slide, please. Brief speaker introduction. Today we are joined by two staff from the National Council on Independent Living, Executive Director Theo Brady and Program Director Mary Kate Wells. We are joined from two staff members from the Regional Access and Mobilization Project, or NCIL, have also joined us. Ron Jackson, the Fast Track Specialist, and Jeremy Munson, the Employment Services Manager. And now we will turn it over to Nicole, who will begin the first part of the presentation. Next slide, please, Chairnet. And Nicole, take it away.
Thank you so much, Amy, and hello, everyone. We are really excited to share this space with you all today to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Rehabilitation Act and to highlight the independent living and employment. My name is Mary Kate Wells. As Amy said, I am the Program Director at the National Council on Independent Living. And for a visual description of myself, I am a white female with short reddish hair wearing a black shirt. The background is blurred. I am also a person with a disability. The National Council on Independent Living is the longest running national cross-disability grassroots organization run by and for people with disabilities. We represent organizations and individuals, including people with disabilities, centers for independent living, statewide independent living councils, and other related organizations to advance independent living and the rights of people with disabilities. The Rehab Act was not only the first piece of civil rights legislation that protected people with disabilities from discrimination, but it also established into law the Independent Living Program and Centers for Independent Living. And so today we are going to highlight how the Independent Living Program, movement, and philosophy is vital to supporting people with disabilities in community living and employment. Next slide, please. Awesome. So just to make sure we all are all on the same page today about what is independent living. And so when we're talking about it today, we're talking about it as a program through Centers for Independent Living, also a movement and a philosophy. And it really aims to empower and maximize leadership, independence, and productivity of individuals with disabilities, as well as promoting integration and full inclusion into mainstream society. And a large part of that is employment. Next slide, please. So Centers for Independent Living are private nonprofit organizations. They are consumer-controlled, community-based, cross-disability, and non-residential. And centers serve any person with a disability, regardless of age or income. Next slide. And then although each center is unique to meet the needs of their community, all centers are mandated to provide 5 core services. And these services include information and referral, independent living skills training, peer counseling, individual and systems advocacy, and transition. And that could be transition from a nursing home into the community, or also supporting young adults with disabilities transition into post-secondary life. And this is really, I think, where Centers for Independent Living can play a vital role in supporting people with disabilities entering and staying in the workforce. And I'm excited today we're going to hear from a center to really highlight how they're doing employment services. So next slide, please. So before jumping into the meat of the content, centers really are an underutilized partner in employment services. And so you can connect with your local center after hearing us talk today and via a directory that I will put in the chat and also share afterwards. And now I'm going to hand it over to NCIL's Executive Director, Theo Brady, to share a few words on the power of independent living and empowering people with disabilities to achieve community living and employment.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary Kay. Great job. My name is Theo Brady. I'm the Executive Director of the National Council on Independent Living. I want to thank you all for allowing me to come here and speak on this topic. I have a lot to say about it. But my visual description, I'm a Black man, a bally, salt and pepper beard, sort of white and blue checkered shirt for a visual description. So can you go to the next slide, please? Nothing about us without us. I know you all have heard this before, but I want to take that to the next level, right? The truth is, people with disabilities are so woven into the fabric of society that basically that should say nothing without us, right? Because it's important for us as people with disabilities. We can no longer be an afterthought, right? And so often, people with disabilities are, all right? People with disabilities are the best experts and make their own choices and decisions. That is something that often get overlooked, and it's important for it not to be overlooked. And this is hard sometimes for professional people to understand this, mainly because of the medical model and the social model, right? The medical model says we are the problem. The social model says society is the problem, right? People with disabilities don't need to be fixed. The physical and attitudinal barriers need to be removed, right? And I often say this, that the attitude is worse than the physical barriers. In my lifetime, I'm probably going to see where most of the physical barriers are removed. What I won't see, though, is the attitudinal barriers. That is a harder thing to deal with. And often that this is something else that's hard for people to get, that we have the lived experience versus the non-disabled experience. People without disabilities know what they know. They do what they do because they have able bodies, and they don't experience what we experience. And unfortunately, you don't know what you don't know. So often people do things, often most of the time unintentional, because they just don't know. And so that's why we come into play. And I often say this, Centers for Independent Living, in regard to this nation network of Centers for Independent Living, is one of the best held kept secrets. And that's sad, because there's no other model in the country that have people with disabilities running an organization and have a board that is comprised of a majority of people with all types of disabilities. And we don't take advantage of that. People with disabilities have the right to make own choices and control the decisions of their lives, right? This is often referred to as consumer control or consumer directed. And I'm sorry, I'm going to move pretty quickly here. But again, we fight the old way of thinking versus the new way of thinking. And the old way of thinking is that social model that medical model I talked about. And the new way of thinking is that social model that I talked about. Next slide, please. Access and equality, very important. It is more than just being a part of the conversation. It's being at the table and being heard. And again, we get back to that old thing of being an afterthought. It's about being heard and treated fairly. Lastly, we're talking about building up the generation of disability leaders. This is important because of all the unfinished work. We must strengthen and expand the IL network because we have so much more to do. And that's where ableism come in, which is the real enemy. All of the wonderful laws and Rehab Act that we have out there, we're celebrating that, the ADA, Olmstead, money followed the person, the Affordable Care Act, and yet America still has an institutional bias, putting people in the institution. This is what is left out of the conversation, right? We got to deal with ableism. It's our worst enemy. And again, I say this, nothing without us. Thank you.
Thank you, Theo. Now I'm going to turn it over to NCIL to talk about their employment services at their center. So Jeremy and Ron, you can take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Ron Jackson, and I use he, him pronouns. Today, I am wearing a green shirt that says, "In a world where you can be anything, be kind," and it has RAMP on it in black lettering. I am also sitting in a power wheelchair and in front of a virtual background that says RAMP. Next slide, please. So today we are going to discuss 3 main points of employment and also the history of our Center for Independent Living. We will discuss Ticket to Work, the DRS or Vocational Rehabilitation, Employment Services, and Project Search. Next slide, please. RAMP started in 1980, and it was the second Center for Independent Living that was formed in the state of Illinois. We cover Boone, DeKalb, Stevenson, and Winnebago, which is the northwest corner of the state. And our motto is to build an inclusive community that encourages individuals with disabilities to reach their full potential. Next slide, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Munson. I'm the Employment Services Manager at RAMP. I'm a white male, mid-40s, gray hair, gray beard, today wearing a blue polo shirt, working in a home office as well. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk a little bit about our programming. Going to go into a little bit of the history of our employment services. This is not a service that RAMP had provided. As covered earlier, we've always had our core services, but RAMP has always been very interested in kind of cutting edge on new services that our area could benefit from. And back in 2012, we were coming out of the Great Recession and kind of some tough times at that point. And we really did a lot of strategic planning of, what does our area need? What do our consumers need? A lot of research, a lot of calls, and we did a lot of listening, and we came up with a couple different ideas. And one of those was employment. Myself and a few others at RAMP at that time had employment backgrounds, and something we all very much believed in. And it seemed that every day we had consumers coming to our door, calling us on the phone, looking for assistance finding jobs in our community. We were very hesitant to get into that business, though, as we had several other vendors in the area that were already providing that service. But over the course of a year of doing some research and talking with folks, we really started to find out it might be great for us to jump into that. As Ron mentioned earlier, we've got 3 different services: our Ticket to Work program, our state program, and our Project Search program that works with the consumers to find jobs in the community. And really our goal is any individual with a disability that wants to work is employed. Our hope is someday, and we continue to strive for this 12 years later, anybody that comes to the door that has that goal and has that self-motivation to make that happen, we want to be able to assist them in doing that. Got a few numbers here. As of January 2023, you can see we've had several hundred folks that have gone to work through our programming. And actually the number of jobs is a higher number because we've had some individuals we've been able to help find employment, and they've held a job, but then moved on to bigger and better opportunities, which is really exciting for us to help people better their financial situation and their financial independence. We go to the next slide, please. And kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, why would a CIL choose to do employment services? But again, through that strategic planning, we just identified that a high percentage of the consumers that were coming our way really had a lot of unmet vocational desires and goals. They were being turned away from other providers. Other providers were really trying to do kind of the square peg and a round hole situation of just throw people into a job. And we knew that was not going to work. We really wanted to spend time with our consumers, getting to know them, getting to know what they like, what they don't like, what's their transportation needs. You know, as a CIL, so many of our staff have been in that role before of having somebody trying to tell them what to do. And that is not what we want to do at all. So we're looking for, you know, motivated individuals who really want to spend that time to find that right job and be somewhere that they can be successful and be there for a long time. What we found after all of that, or how did we find that after all of that time of research, we talked to a lot of different providers nationwide, be it other CILs or employment networks, places like that. We went to you know, Madison, Wisconsin. I spent a lot of time with a provider in Phoenix, Arizona. We really covered the bases to see, you know, what can we build upon our own history and beliefs to make a very successful program for our folks. And really early on, as we started to build upon our beliefs in our system, we had a lot of success. You know, it was a really good time. We were coming out of the recession. The job market was getting better. We had a lot of really motivated individuals. And as we started to see that early success, RAMP was really able to take that leap and put more funding into these programming and hire more staff. And we went from just me doing a one-man show. Today we've got 12 or 13, which still is not a lot of staff, but we're a small CIL of about 40 individuals. So we're a big part of what's happening here at RAMP. And what we'll talk a little bit about today is the many bumps in the road that we learned from as we move forward and continually making adjustments to address those bumps in the road. If we go ahead and advance to the next slide, please.
So we're gonna start with the Ticket to Work program. And this is a program that is contracted through the Social Security Administration. And we are fortunate enough to now have a certified work incentive counselor on staff that can help people navigate through what their benefits are going to look like once they start working, because we found that most people are very scared and misinformed about their ability to work with Social Security and while receiving those benefits. So we try our best to provide accurate information and ease some of those fears. As the individual begins to receive earnings by working, we also get funding for them working, and 1 in 10 of 1% of ticket holders utilize the Ticket to Work option. So it really is still an untapped potential of employment for people with disabilities. I will also say that I am a former ticket holder, so I can speak from experience that it does work if you stick with the process. Next slide, please.
Maybe if we can stick with ticket for just a second. Yeah, we kind of wanted to mention some of the bumps in the road with the Ticket to Work program. And Ron started to mention that it's super underutilized, as you saw, 1/10 of 1%. A lot of the issues there come down to what he was talking about as well, with the issues with people going to work and earnings and their benefits. And there's just a lot of bad information out there. And we hear that from callers every day that are calling about the Ticket to Work program, or we're doing presentations. And there's this belief that, you know, as soon as you go back to work, you're going to lose your check and it's going to be gone. And we all know that's not the case. And we really have to work with folks to understand that every situation is so very different. And that's where our staff and our CWIC can really dig in to find out, you know, when was this person's last earnings? How much can they earn? How this can affect other benefits, and know that there are some safety nets through the Ticket to Work program as well. That we know that it's a very scary proposition to try to go back to work when you've maybe had a, you know, medical condition pop up, or your disability is worsened, or whatever the case might be that maybe derailed you from working, you know, on your career path already. But we have really worked very hard to try to get information to our consumers of, here's what this looks like, and here's how we can help. You know, there might be overpayments, there might be, again, many bumps in the road, but we're going to be there with you every step of the way. And our CWIC can help project some of those things, so that we've had consumers where they're turning their pay stubs in, they're doing everything they need to do, and they still get 4 or 5 months worth of payments maybe they shouldn't have got, or simply overpayments, whatever the case might be. But we're really good about working with those consumers to understand that, hey, you know, hang on to those funds for now. Maybe we can earn a little interest or something like that, but the day is going to come where we need to pay that back. That's certainly not as scary than just getting something in the mail of, hey, you owe us $10,000. Those things really, the more resources we can provide to help people understand that, yes, these bumps are here, but let us help you kind of map that out. And not only with our CWIC, but also the WIPA associates in our areas that can really help people with benefits and understanding what that looks like.
I will also add that we stick with consumers for a period of 5 years after they obtain a job. So we don't just say, great, you got a job, good luck to you. We stick with you. We check in regularly to make sure you're doing okay. We check in to make sure that you understand that you might lose certain insurance benefits, but there are ways to pay for those things without having to spend too much money. So we really do try to prepare folks the best we can for those potentially scary life occurrences that you might not know about if you try to work while you're on Social Security.
As an agency, trying to provide Ticket to Work services can be a couple more bumps. One is it's a pretty lengthy process to get approved to be an employment network through Social Security. It's really intense. You really have to have a staff person that really is into details and really staying on top of lots of changes and things coming your way. And we've been fortunate to have somebody over the last several years that fits that role for us, who is also the CWIC. The other part of that too is that the funding sometimes is slow to come. So we were fortunate that RAMP was able to make an investment many, many years ago and know that we weren't going to be real profitable through this program for a lengthy period of time, but gave us enough time to kind of get that wheel moving. And now we're in a really great position where we're serving over 80 ticket holders. And, you know, that program just continues to grow. Even during the COVID years, we were able to see that happen. So it's kind of been a fantastic thing to watch. So if we could move to the next slide, and Ron, I'll let you take back over.
Thank you. So we also have the vocational rehabilitation program through the state of Illinois. And this program is for people who either don't have Social Security at all or want to remain on it but still want some extra money coming in. The thing about this program is that there are 3 milestones of employment that we can get paid for: 15 days, 45 days, and 90 days. So once a person is employed for 15 days, we get a payment. 45 days, we get another payment. And at 90 days, we get the final payment. After that 90 days, the person is closed for this service. However, if there are issues, again, they can always call us and we will help them out for up to a year before we have to go back to the state of Illinois and do the paperwork all over again. Jeremy, did you have anything to add to that?
Not to the payments part of that, but I would mention that, this program, as it says, is really ideal for people that are receiving benefits, be it from Social Security or wherever else that's affected by earnings, because there's no expectation of having to work yourself off of those benefits in this program. Ticket to Work, we kind of failed to mention, that is the whole goal of Ticket to Work, is for people to become financially self-sufficient. So they know going into that, if we're going to work with them through that program, eventually they're going to work their way off of benefits. Some folks, that just doesn't make sense. Some consumers, it doesn't make sense, or they're just not willing to take that leap, and we totally understand that. We're fortunate to have this program as a backup. This program also doesn't provide on-the-job training, so there's no job coaching on the job, but what Ron and other staff are doing is doing a great job of getting people prepared for the job seeking part of things and learning soft skills along the way, and then being available to do counseling away from the job post-employment if that's what needs to happen. Ron, do you want to talk a little bit about what those services look like as far as helping somebody get to the point of applying for work?
Sure. So when someone comes to us and says that they want a job and they've already been sent to us by the Vocational Rehabilitation Office, what we do is we sit down with them and we ask them questions like, what do you want to do? How many hours do you want to work? How are you planning to get to work? Things like that. From there, we typically look at their resume if they have one and see how we can improve it, or if they don't have one at all, we help them create one. We can also practice interview skills, help them get interview clothing through a partnership that we have with Goodwill here in our area. So it's really a hands-on process from the time that they walk into our door until the time that they no longer need our services.
I think that's a time that really shows our strength as a SIL providing this service too, because the majority of our staff are folks that have a disability themselves. They've been job seekers in that spot before. And then several of us that also have been doing this for a long, long time. And we really get the opportunity to work with people that are so motivated. I think of when I was younger and I worked at a different agency, and we would have people come in that really weren't interested in going to work, but mom and dad thought it was a good idea, or somebody else thought it was a good idea and they need to do that. And the frustration as a provider, knowing that, well, mom and dad aren't going to be the ones going to work. We really need this person to have that motivation. And it doesn't work. If they're not motivated, they're not going to go to work. Going to work is not an easy thing to do, right? Like there's always, no matter how much you love your job, there's those days that test things. And we really need folks that are motivated. And I really appreciate that at a Center for Independent Living, that, our consumers are setting their own goals. They're working towards their own goals. We have those really cool conversations of, why do you want to go to work? For 9 out of 10 people, they'll answer that with, I'd like to make some money or have some more money and be financially more independent. But we get a lot of great answers too of, there's more to life than living on Social Security, and I'm tired of staring at the TV and 4 walls. I miss being out there in the world. I have something more to give. And I think as a Center for Independent Living, we're able to, address so many of those other goals that they might want to work on that are going to help their job process and being successful on the job. And just so thankful that we're able to really work with people that are so motivated to benefit from the services that Ron and the team are able to provide. Some of the bumps in the road for this one is pretty straightforward. It's the funding is difficult for this program, at least here in the state of Illinois. We have some really great people at the state that we work with, but of course there's never enough funding to go around. So every year we get a contract and we get to perform up to that contract, but we've had several years where we've outperformed the contract and we're trying to find more funding along the way. So that gets to be kind of difficult if the funding's not there. Also, COVID has been a real huge issue with all of our employment programs, but this one in particular, we saw a lot of state of Illinois employees leave during that time, and we need their participation on the funding end of things. So what we've seen now is from the time that somebody calls RAMP to the time that they can get their case approved at the state level is taking somewhere between 6 and 12 months, where that used to be more of like a month kind of situation. So we're working with our local legislators and our state folks to really try to make that more efficient, help our consumers. If they're calling us today wanting to find a job, that means they want to find a job now, not 12 months from now. So we really are trying to work through that. That's something kind of new. And again, that's a COVID related issue that we've unfortunately ran into. We go to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about Project Search. So Project Search is our newest program, and we started it back in 2017, but in all reality, we started researching it a couple years prior to that. What we had really found was we were doing a great job with adult job seekers, but what we were really missing in our area was transition programming that was really effective for students coming out of school. So we were doing a lot of research and working with our local Intersect for Ability, and we got to meet the creators of Project Search via a phone call from Cincinnati Children's Hospital. And we got off that phone call and looked at each other and said, okay, this has to happen. We've got to find a way to make this happen. There was no funding, no partners. There was nothing at that point, but we very much wanted to make it happen. So a lot of legwork, a lot of work with partners and meetings and all those kinds of things. Then finally in 2017, we were able to open the doors to our first site. Project Search is a collaboration between a provider, which for us is RAMP, local school districts, a host business, and the state of Illinois for us, because that's the, again, the funding source for Project Search. Our host businesses now, we're at 3 sites, is Mercy Health, Embassy Suites, and also Northwestern Hospital. So we've really been able to be fortunate to have some really great partners to work through this. The rates of success for this program is what really caught our attention when we first heard about it. They had about a 70% success rate, where more traditional transition programming was coming in at under 20%. Really started to dig into that, and what we find out is when you work with Project Search, they have got an entire curriculum set for you. And what's going to happen is that student is going to spend their last year of school not at their high school any longer, but now they're going to be at one of these host businesses. So we have a teacher from our local school districts that teaches a class for about an hour every morning. But the next 4 or 5 hours, our students actually get to go out into these host businesses and work at different internships. So they're getting just invaluable opportunities to learn transferable skills that they're going to be able to then move on to eventually paid employment, which is the goal of the program. So for the first 6-7 months, we really focus on, let's teach these young folks how to really be a good employee. How do you look for work? How do you get along with coworkers? What do you do when there's a bump in the road kind of thing? But also learn actual job skills. So at Mercy Health, which was our first site, we really learned that hospitals are the best place to do this because they're kind of like little cities. So there's all the patient-facing kind of departments we're all familiar with from spending time in hospitals. But there's so many things that happen behind the scenes, from like central supply and sterilization, volunteer services, human resources. I mean, you name it. There's just so many different opportunities for students to really get a chance to try out a lot of different departments and kind of focus in on what those skills are necessary for the departments that they might want to look at, maybe staying at the hospital or taking those transferable skills out in the community and finding paid employment upon graduation from Project Search. We have seen about a 90% success rate with our Project Search sites to this point. The COVID year withstanding, But what we've seen with our other years is that anybody that's really not been successful at Project Search has been somebody that maybe has moved or they've left the area. You know, anybody that's really graduated from Project Search and is wanting to go to work has found just terrific jobs. And we're talking about folks that might have been looking for supported employment opportunities out of school. And here in our area, you know, that usually means pretty limited hours and pretty limited opportunities for advancement, those kinds of things. But because of the referrals, the references that they make by working at these host sites, and all these transferable skills that they learn, they're going on to get really great job opportunities. So a lot of our graduates are going into full-time jobs, benefits, just really amazing opportunities. And I firmly believe that wouldn't happen without Project Search and our ability to bring that to the area. And we're so excited to have 3 sites now. And, you know, you serve anywhere between 8 or 12 students per site. So it's still a pretty small number. But being able to do that in 3 different places now has really opened up a lot of opportunities. And one of the bumps in the road now for us is actually finding enough students to fill the sites. Again, you know, the misunderstanding of how earnings might work, losing money by working, which is, you know, rarely the case. Those are the kinds of things that we really have to start working with our students and our families on to understand, you know, what a great opportunity this is, and that the students are going to come out in such a better place after Project Search. And what's great now is after several years of doing this, is our students and our graduates can come back and talk to current students or, you know, students in the future and talk about their experiences. And there's certainly no better way to go than having our graduates talk about their success and how it's bettered their lives. And we're just, you know, again, so grateful to be a part of this. And we hope that, you know, all students that have an interest in Project Search here in our area will have that opportunity as we move further down the road. So I think at this time, we will turn things back over to Amy.
Thank you very much. Rampsil and Nicole for those amazing words and presentations. Chair, next slide, please. What we will do now, we will begin the question and answer portion of the presentation. We see some questions in the Q&A. Folks, please keep those questions coming. The first question that we have is for Rampsil. This is about referrals and kind of process. So the question is, who refers school-age students to a SIL for transition services? And then a follow-up question to that is, what services are available for individuals that are not working or going to college? So Jeremy and Ron, go for it.
So most of our referrals are coming from schools. We've really done a great job of building relationships with our local school districts and teachers and case managers. And once they're able to work with us, they really understand what a great resource we are for transition age students and for them as they build transition planning. We have really tried to find ways to connect to students and families away from schools. And we really, to be honest, continue to struggle with that. You know, we've worked with Special Olympics or, you know, folks that provide some adult residential services, you know, different things like that. But really the schools become our best resource as far as referrals and getting us connected with students and families that would like to work with us. And I've got to apologize, Amy, what was the second part of the question?
Oh, no problem. It was a long one. No big deal. I'll repeat. The second part of the question is, what services are available for individuals that are not working currently or in college?
Ron, do you want to talk about Fast Track?
Yeah, I'll talk about Fast Track. So one of our other programs for transition age students is called Fast Track. And Fast Track is a pre-employment program for students that are age 14 to 22 that teaches them skills such as how to build a resume, how to know what their laws are once they start working, how to understand that they won't have an IEP once they work, but they can rely on the Americans with Disabilities Act. We look at careers that they might want to do. We try to set up a job shadow in a career that they are interested in, and we also practice interview skills over and over again. So those are some of the skills that we can provide to help students get ready for job transition.
What's been amazing with that program is Ron and his team have done such a great job that we don't provide job placement via that program. The state of Illinois still leaves that up to the schools while the student is in school. But Ron and his team have done an amazing job teaching skills, and the students have been able to translate that into finding jobs of their own. And I think last year, Ron, you had a couple dozen students that were able to use your training and what you've taught them to go out and actually identify and apply and interview and successfully work. And it's really just been fantastic to watch them be able to do that at that age and maybe not need to worry about getting into, adult services, because now they're out there acting independently and making money and able to, live a good quality of life.
Yes, quite a few of them actually got jobs in the process of completing Fast Track. So that was amazing to see.
Excellent, thank you. The next question is for DETAC. Will this session be archived? And yes, that is correct. After the webinar, it is recorded. If you registered for the webinar, you will be emailed the recording. If not, for some reason, if you joined late and didn't get the materials in advance, you can just head to our website. You'll be able to check out that website at the end slide to access the archived webinar. Next question. This is also for RAMP. Does the Employment First program with RAMP have a program for people with disabilities who want to work in public service?
So we work with each one of our job seekers very specifically. We don't have any idea as somebody's entering the program of, here's a path we have for work, here's another path for a different kind of work. As Ron had mentioned, we really want to work specifically with each person and kind of customize a plan of what do they want to do, what makes sense for them transportation-wise. And if that is public service, then we have absolutely gone down that road. The state of Illinois does have a preference option for some different folks, and somebody with a disability does get a preference, through that system. I've not really worked in that system in a long time, so I can't speak real specific to it. But I think one of the things that has led to our success is that Ron and the rest of the team really, again, work with those individuals to identify, not only what do they want to do, what are they going to enjoy, but also to have real honest conversations about what's available in our community. Ron and I like to laugh about every 15-year-old in Belvedere, Illinois wants to be a video game producer. And you know what? Some of them might be video game programmers or whatever at some point, but usually not at 15 years old and not out in Belvedere, Illinois. It's probably not going to happen. So we're able to have some really cool conversations about, what is here now? What can we help you with now? And where can we get you to that might help you with more of a long-term idea of what you'd like to do? So again, yes, we could definitely help with that. But we don't necessarily have any tracks already set up of this is the way you're going to go. We really want to customize that for you.
Okay, great. Next question, and it's for RAMP again. So those programs are a hot topic. Have you used customized employment strategies in any of the programs and any of the work that you do?
That's a great question. So customized employment is something that we just know a little bit about. Unfortunately, it's fairly new in the state of Illinois as far as services being provided through our DRS offices. And at this point, RAMP has not gone down that path to provide those services quite yet. Something we continue to look at. We're about to start strategic planning yet again here in the next couple of months. And we don't provide supported employment at this time. We're not doing customized employment quite yet. However, I would say that we do borrow some tactics from customized employment. when we talk to our consumers about what they're looking to do. And again, really trying to find jobs that are going to be long lasting and fruitful for them. So no, we don't do that quite yet. But when I mentioned earlier that we're hopeful someday that anybody comes to the door and has that need, we'll be able to get there. But no surprise, right? Funding is probably the holdback right now on that.
Thanks. Let's talk
Amy,
about project-
can I add something to that, please?
Oh, yes, please. Go ahead, Theo.
I would just like to say that just keep in mind that RAMP program is just one center among over 600 and some centers in the nation. And all of those different centers like RAMP can specialize in employment, but others keep information on jobs and like the question about public service. I would suggest that you look at that map that Mary Kay provided, contact your local center and see what other programs that are being offered, because each center is very unique and often keep job lists and so forth. Okay, thank you.
Great suggestions, Theo. So just to reiterate that very golden nugget of information, if you're really looking to find a SIL, to identify what type of services that they offer, please refer back to that map that Mary Kate shared towards the beginning part of the presentation so that you can find your local SIL. Thank you, Theo, for that wonderful suggestion. Okay, these next questions are about your project search site, RAMP team. The first one is, how many staff members are allocated to provide project search services at RAMP and each respective site?
Great question. So project search has kind of a requirement, I guess, of a 4-to-1 staff to consumer ratio. So at each site, we have one teacher, and then depending on the number of students, we'll have 1 or 2 RAMP staff that'll be responsible for teaching them their internships, being their job coach per se on site, but also being their employment specialist that's going to help them to find jobs in the community upon graduation. So right now, one of our sites is 12 students, so we have 3 total staff there. We have another site of 8 students, so there's 2 staff there. The other site is also 8 students, there's 2 staff there.
Okay, thanks. And so I'm just reposting the link that Mary Kate shared to find your local SIL. Okay, let me go back up to the Q&A. You were just talking about funding, RAMP. The question is, how is your project search site funded? And I'm sure you probably also go into the partnerships around that funding stream.
Yeah, it's very complicated, and unfortunately, in Illinois, it's pretty severely underfunded. So when we went into project search, we knew that our development team was really going to have to help us to kind of balance with grants and fundraising and different things like that. So we're funded for each one of our successful graduating students, basically through the state of Illinois. Once they find employment and they're successfully employed for 90 days. So we're with a student from the time they enter, let's say around Labor Day, all the way through they graduate in May or maybe June. When they finally find that job, for some people, they're going to find jobs before they even walk out of project search. But for others, it might be later in that summer, maybe even early fall, another 30 days before some of that funding comes in. So it's a difficulty for us. But again, the outcomes of what happens through that program, we really believe makes it well worth us needing to fundraise and write grants and do all those other things to make that happen. Our participating school districts also pay a small fee that helps offset some of the costs for staff on our end as well.
Okay, great. I'm going to ask a question for Nicole. You folks are the national point of contact for some of these, or for the SILs across the country. And so, Theo, what type of activities do you see most common in some of the SILs? You mentioned earlier that SILs provide an array of services. Can you just provide some insight into, what activities you're seeing across the country in the SILs around the areas?
Yeah, no problem. Again, centers are very unique, right? Typically what is provided is based on what is described as a need in their community, because one of the things they do is to seek input from people with disabilities living in those geographical areas, and then they design programs around that. But most centers, well, all the centers, not most, provide basically a number of core services, right? Independent living skills training, how to live in the community independently, information and referral, very much on that information referral in regard resources and supports for people who have questions of how to do things. They also provide some service coordination in regard to how to live well and how to function within the community. Another important one is nursing home transitioning, right? A lot of people are inappropriately placed in nursing home, and centers are very skilled at getting people out of those nursing homes and getting them back living in the community with adequate support services. And we do a lot of system and individual advocacy. You're facing a problem that you can't get answers to, and we see that is a violation of your basic civil rights. Centers can work with you and advocate on your behalf alongside them to really get the things that you need. I saw one question about, when do you approach your transition coordinator if your student is in junior or high school about transitioning. That would be one of the things a center can advocate with you to get that information, or to get, if you see a service transition coordinator not doing what they're supposed to do, that is system advocacy or individual advocacy, and a center is staffed and mandated to work with you on those issues.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Theo. Next question, back to Ramp. What services are available for students with complex medical needs and communication needs after school ends?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something we're trying to piece together here as well, a better answer. We have supported employment vendors through the state of Illinois and different people providing some of those services. But I firmly believe that's a population that's really underserved, and we don't have a great answer in our area at this time. Ron, I don't know if you'd have any input on that.
I would say it would depend on the situation, but my best answer would be to seek whatever supported employment options you have in your area.
We got another question. It's about some trends maybe in the referral process that you folks have at Ramp. Do you see students with disabilities who want to work in their junior or senior year, possibly earlier, reaching out to their school transition counselors to ask for a referral to VR? Or do teachers and parents tend to take this step on behalf of students with disabilities?
I think it's both. I think we've done a really great job over the years. The longer we've been able to provide some transition services, to really start talking to even 7th and 8th graders about these topics. And maybe they don't make a lot of sense at that point, but I think the younger the student we see, more likely it's the parent that's pushing. But once we've been able to meet with that student and kind of work over the course of their high school career, it really does become the student that's pushing for those services and for help finding a job. I'm sorry, Ron, I think you were going to say something.
I would say that initially it is the parents, but once we actually start working with the student, like Jeremy said, they become very interested in their own employment. I had a student last year that was adamant that they talked to Meta because they wanted to learn about how to become a virtual reality video game developer, and I was able to make that happen. So you will start to see even sophomores begin to really formulate their own plan for wanting to work once they're done with school.
Hey, Amy.
Yeah.
Can I add to that, please?
Please do.
One of the things that we see, and I spoke about in my part, was that people with disabilities got to be their own best advocate. They got to be empowered to speak for themselves. And that is so key when it comes to young people with disabilities. as well as the parent. All right. We have always found out that often professional people will want to take charge and do things maybe differently than what the person with disability would want to do. So one of the things all local centers try to do is empower consumers and students with disabilities to speak for themselves.
Excellent. One last question, and then we'll turn it over to DETAC updates. And so this is all for Nicole. Do you have any recommendations for fostering SIL participation and engagement beyond their typical geographical scope?
That's a very interesting question. I wonder who will pose that one. Typically, the way it works is all centers serve a particular geographical area, right, in regard to their federal and state mandate. That does not mean that based on input from the community, based on a lack of services, as people speak up on these things, that a center based on working with another SEAL director cannot come together and collaborate on a program that sort of makes a difference in that particular area. Like when I ran a Center for Independent Living in Pennsylvania, one of the things that came up was from people who was deafblind is that we don't have a support service provider program, right? And so one of the things that we did based on that input was to create and go beyond our service areas to create a statewide SSP program for people who are deafblind. So yes, it can happen, but it should be done in collaboration.
Thank you very much. Now we will go to the next slide for some quick DETAC updates. So we'd like to invite you to our October webinar to celebrate National Disability Employment Awareness Month, where we are going to talk about advancing access and equity for people with disabilities through technological innovations. So register there. The speaker lineup is coming soon. Next slide, please. We are very excited to announce our new Results and Systems Excellence e-learning community focused on strategies to phase out 14C. Now, we were joined in June to celebrate Olmsted by our partners at the National Disability Rights Network. They talked about a report. They talked about key strategies and elements for 14C phase out. They will be the facilitators for this 4-session e-learning community that will begin in October and will end in January. So please click on that link below, register. Space is limited. We're really excited to see you folks at the table for that e-learning community. Next slide, please. As we wrap up, we would like to remind you that the DETAC provides free technical assistance to grantees. So if you have a need to enhance partnerships or to up your game on employment, please reach out to us so we can schedule an initial call to learn more about the needs that you have and how we can provide some free support. Just a special note that ChairNet also put the announcement and the link to register for that e-learning community in the chat. Next slide, please. This is our website page. So if you want to check out our publications, our resources, our archived events, please check it out. As we wind down, I'd like to thank Nicole. I'd like to thank RAMPSIL for being here today, for presenting and sharing some very important elements as we commemorate the Rehabilitation Act. So thank you everyone for being here today, and we hope you have a wonderful evening. Take care. Bye-bye.